Some confrontations are just about pride, others are about prejudice. But every once in a while, a moment of conflict becomes a crossroads of destiny where a single act of contempt can unravel an entire empire. This is the story of a woman in a simple grey hoodie, dismissed and humiliated at the gate of a private airport. They saw a fraud, an imposter who didn't belong. What they failed to see was the architect of their own future, a woman whose name wasn't just on the passenger manifest, but painted in 6-foot letters on the tail of the very jet they were blocking. This isn't just a story of revenge, it's a story of karma delivered at 40,000 feet. The air in the signature flight support terminal at Teterboro Airport had a unique scent, a sterile blend of expensive leather, freshly brewed coffee, and the faint, thrilling tang of jet fuel. It was an atmosphere of quiet, immense power. Men in tailored suits spoke in hushed tones into their phones, their conversations worth more than the cars in the parking lot. Women with heirloom jewelry and crocodile skin handbags glided across the polished marble floors, their movements practiced and serene. And then there was Anya Sharma. She sat in a firm leather armchair, dwarfed by its sheer size, looking utterly out of place. She wasn't wearing a power suit or designer labels. Instead, she wore soft, worn-in jeans, a simple grey hooded sweatshirt with the hood down, and a pair of unassuming sneakers. Her dark hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, and her face, devoid of makeup, was focused intently on the battered laptop resting on her knees. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, a flurry of activity in the cathedral-like calm of the lounge. She was an island of frantic, focused energy, in an ocean of languid privilege. She was so absorbed in her work, finalizing the last lines of a complex algorithm for a presentation in London, that she almost missed the boarding call. A crisp, impersonal voice crackled over the PA system. "Now boarding flight to London Luton. All passengers, please proceed to gate 3. Anya saved her work, closed the laptop, and slid it into a simple canvas backpack. As she stood, she drew the attention of a couple seated nearby. The man, Gregory Beaumont, was in his late 50s, with a mane of silver hair and a face that seemed permanently set in a look of mild disapproval. He wore a cashmere blazer that probably cost more than Anya's rent. His wife, Matilda, was a vision in cream-colored silk, her expression a mirror of her husband's. Gregory's eyes scanned Anya from her sneakers to her hoodie, and a small derisive smirk touched his lips. He leaned over and whispered something to his wife, who let out a barely audible breathy scoff. Anya felt the sting of their judgment, but ignored it. She'd dealt with it her whole life. The quiet assumptions, the dismissive glances. It was the price of not fitting into their neatly labeled boxes. She slung her backpack over her shoulder and walked towards the gate, her boarding pass a simple printout in her hand. At the gate desk stood a woman whose name tag read Brenda. Brenda had the tired, perpetually stressed look of someone who had been dealing with the whims of the ultra-wealthy for far too long. She saw her job not as a service, but as a defense. She was the guardian of the gate, and her default setting was suspicion. "Boarding pass," she said, her voice flat, not even looking up. Anya slid the paper across the counter. Brenda picked it up, her eyes scanning it with practiced speed. Then she stopped. She looked up at Anya for the first time, her gaze sharp and accusatory. She looked back down at the paper, then up at Anya again. "Anya Sharma." Brenda read aloud, her tone laced with disbelief. "That's me," Anya said calmly. Brenda's eyes narrowed. She took in the hoodie, the backpack, the lack of any visible trapping of wealth. This was Teterboro. People didn't fly private to London, looking like they were heading to a college lecture. "This is a private charter, ma'am. Brenda said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "For the Beaumont party." "I know," Anya replied, her voice still even. "I'm on the manifest." Behind her, Gregory Beaumont and his wife had arrived. He cleared his throat, a sound full of impatience and importance. "Is there a problem, Brenda? We're on a rather tight schedule." Brenda offered him a thin, obsequious smile before turning her glare back to Anya. "Just verifying our passenger list, Mr. Beaumont. One moment." She turned to her computer, her fingers clicking loudly on the keyboard. "I'm not seeing an Anya Sharma listed as a guest of the Beaumont party." "I'm not their guest," Anya stated. Gregory Beaumont stepped forward, his cologne washing over the counter in a wave. "Then what precisely are you? A stowaway? Did you get lost on your way to Newark International?" He chuckled at his own joke. Matilda joined in with a tittering laugh. The humiliation was a physical heat that rose in Anya's cheeks. But years of navigating boardrooms filled with men like Gregory had taught her to build a fortress of calm around her emotions. "No," she said, her voice dropping to a lower, colder register. "I'm on the manifest because the jet is mine." The statement hung in the air for a moment. Then Brenda let out a short, sharp laugh. It wasn't a sound of humor. It was a sound of pure derision. "Yours, ma'am, this is a Gulfstream G700. It's a $20 million aircraft chartered for the week. You can't just walk in here and claim it." "I didn't charter it," Anya said, her patience beginning to fray. "I own it, and it's a $75 million aircraft for the record." This was too much for Gregory Beaumont. He stepped right up to the counter, positioning himself between Anya and the gate agent, a deliberate act of exclusion. "Brenda, this is ridiculous. This woman is clearly delusional. She's either a con artist or mentally unwell. Either way, she is wasting our time and is a potential security risk. I insist you call security and have her removed." Brenda nodded eagerly, relieved to have her prejudice validated by a real client. "Yes, Mr. Beaumont, right away." She reached for the phone on her desk. "Don't—" Anya's voice cut through the air, sharp as glass. It held a sudden, undeniable authority that made Brenda's hand pause. "You are making a monumental mistake." "The only mistake was me being polite." Brenda sneered, her confidence bolstered by the Beaumonts. "Security is on their way. You can explain your story to them." "This is absurd," Matilda Beaumont added, her voice dripping with disdain. "The sort of person they let wander in here these days. It's simply not safe." Anya looked from Brenda's smug face to Gregory's condescending snare. They had already tried and convicted her in their minds. She was a fraud, an outsider, an impossibility. She was blocked from the tarmac, humiliated in public, and about to be escorted out by security. The most important meeting of her career was just hours away in London, and she was stuck here, judged by the cover of her book, while the fools holding it couldn't even read the title. A cold fury began to replace the hot humiliation. They wanted proof. She would give them proof they would never forget. The sterile air of the terminal seemed to thicken, pressing in on Anya. For a fleeting moment, the faces of Brenda and the Beaumonts blurred into a gallery of every dismissive expression she had ever encountered. The high school guidance counselor who suggested she aim for something more practical than theoretical physics. The venture capitalist who told her to come back with a male co-founder to be taken seriously. The rivals who called her work a vanity project. They were all here in this moment, embodied in the sneering faces in front of her. But this was different. This wasn't just about pride. This flight was the culmination of a decade of relentless work, of sleepless nights, fueled by caffeine and pure obsession. The world saw Anya Sharma, if they saw her at all, as the quiet, reclusive founder of Nexus Logistics. The media wrote fluff pieces about her company's software, optimizing supply chains for retail giants, making deliveries faster and more efficient. It was a solid, profitable, and deeply boring public image. But Nexus Logistics was a front. A brilliantly profitable one, but a front nonetheless. The real work, the work she was about to present in London, was happening in a secret division of her company, codenamed Project Catalyst. It was a quantum computing initiative. Not theoretical, not academic, but a functional, scalable quantum processor that could solve logistical problems previously thought unsolvable. Problems like optimizing the entire global shipping network in real time or modeling climate change with terrifying accuracy, or most lucratively breaking modern encryption. The meeting in London wasn't just a presentation, it was an acquisition. Viridian Dynamics, a massive London-based defense and technology conglomerate, was on the verge of acquiring Project Catalyst for a sum that would reshape the entire tech landscape. The deal was valued at $11 billion. More importantly, it was a partnership. Viridian had the infrastructure, the government contracts, the global reach to implement her technology for goals far beyond simple package delivery. They wanted to use it to create a global predictive anti-disaster system, modeling hurricane paths, earthquake probabilities, and pandemic spreads with enough accuracy to save thousands of lives. It was the fulfillment of her life's work. But the deal was fragile. The Viridian board was old school. They were nervous about a quantum leap of this magnitude, and even more nervous about its enigmatic young creator. The CEO, Alistair Finch, was her champion, but he had factions on his board who were looking for any excuse to scuttle the deal and stick with more conventional, less disruptive technologies. One of those vocal opponents was a board member who controlled a significant voting bloc, a man known for his conservative, risk-averse stance, a man named Gregory Beaumont. The irony was so thick Anya could have choked on it. The man currently trying to have her thrown out of the airport was a key voting member on the board she was flying to meet. He didn't know who she was. He had no idea that the fraud in the grey hoodie held the fate of his own company's technological future in her hands. He was flying to London to attend the very same emergency board meeting called to approve or deny the acquisition of her project. The clock was ticking, not just metaphorically. The quantum processor back at her lab was incredibly sensitive. It required a constant, stable connection to a monitoring system she carried with her. A sudden disconnection or a long delay could corrupt the delicate quantum state of the qubits, setting her demonstration back by days, if not weeks. The entire presentation in London hinged on a live, real-time demonstration of the processor's power. If she missed this window, the demonstration would be impossible. The doubters on the Viridian board, like Beaumont, would have the excuse they needed. The technology is unstable, they would say. The founder is unreliable. The deal would collapse. A decade of her life's work would evaporate. The potential to save lives, to change the world, would be snuffed out by the petty arrogance of a man who couldn't see past her sweatshirt. Anya took a slow, deep breath, pulling her composure back from the brink. The cold fury inside her was now crystallizing into something sharp and precise. A plan. She wasn't just going to get on her plane. She was going to make sure that Gregory Beaumont and Brenda the gate agent understood the exact magnitude of the force they had just provoked. "You want to call security," Anya said, her voice now devoid of any warmth. "Go ahead. But when they arrive, you will not be asking them to remove me. You will be asking them to witness your formal apology." Brenda scoffed her hand, finally gripping the phone receiver. "You're in no position to make demands." "Oh, I think I am," Anya replied, a faint, dangerous smile playing on her lips. "You see, my name isn't just on the manifest you can't seem to read. It's somewhere much more difficult to ignore. She turned her gaze from Brenda to Gregory, holding his contemptuous stare. The ticking of the quantum clock in her mind was deafening. The fate of $11 billion and a world-changing technology rested on what she did in the next 5 minutes. The tension in the small pocket of the terminal was now a palpable thing. It drew stares from other passengers who began to murmur amongst themselves, sensing the unfolding drama. Brenda, holding the phone receiver like a weapon, had already dialed the first digit for airport security. Gregory Beaumont stood with his arms crossed, a smug, triumphant look on his face. He was a man accustomed to the world bending to his will, and he was savoring the moment. "Final chance, miss," Brenda said, her finger hovering over the next button. "Leave now under your own power." "I told you," Anya said, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the murmurs. "You're making a mistake." She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and held it up. On the screen was a digital copy of her passport and a corporate ID card. Anya Sharma, CEO, Nexus Logistics. Brenda glanced at it and waved a dismissive hand. "Anyone can fake an ID. That means nothing." Gregory chuckled. "Nexus Logistics. That delivery company, darling, they barely make enough to afford a commercial ticket in business class, let alone a private jet. A nice try, but the fantasy is over." Anya slowly lowered her phone. The condescension was staggering. They saw logistics and thought trucks and boxes. They couldn't conceive of the reality, a company whose server farms and proprietary software generated more net profit than Beaumont's entire portfolio of legacy manufacturing and real estate holdings. Just as Brenda was about to press the second digit, a man in a crisp pilot's uniform strode purposefully towards the gate. He was in his late 40s with a calm, weathered face and the unmistakable air of a man who commanded a multi-ton machine through the stratosphere for a living. His uniform bore the insignia of a captain. "Captain Miller." Brenda said, her tone shifting slightly, recognizing the uniform's authority. "Is there an issue with the pre-flight check?" "No issue with the jet." Brenda, Captain Frank Miller said, his voice a calm baritone. He nodded politely at the Beaumonts, then his eyes landed on Anya. A look of recognition and respect dawned on his face. "Ms. Sharma, I was just about to come find you. We're fully fueled and ready for departure on your signal." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Gregory Beaumont's smug expression faltered for the first time. Brenda's hand froze over the phone. "Ms. Sharma," Brenda repeated the name, sounding foreign and unbelievable on her tongue. "Yes," Captain Miller affirmed, looking from Anya to Brenda, sensing the thick tension. "My boss, the owner of the aircraft we're flying to London today. Is there a problem here?" Brenda's face began a slow, fascinating transformation from smug certainty to pale confusion. She looked from the captain's earnest face to Anya's plain grey hoodie. The two images refused to compute in her brain. Gregory Beaumont, however, recovered quickly. His mind, accustomed to corporate power, Plays immediately jumped to a different conclusion. "Ah, I see," he said, a new oily smile spreading across his face. "This young lady works for the owner. An assistant, perhaps, sent ahead to make sure everything is in order. Very diligent." He turned to Anya. "You should have just said so, my dear. There's no need for all this theatrics about owning the plane." He thought he was being gracious, offering her an exit from her lie. To Anya, it was perhaps the most insulting thing he had said yet. He simply would not allow for the possibility that she was in charge. His entire worldview depended on it. Captain Miller's brow furrowed. "Sir, with all due respect, you're mistaken. Miss Sharma founded the company that designed the avionics software we're running, And she bought this Gulfstream G700 from the factory 2 months ago. I fly for her, not the other way around." He looked at Anya. "Ms. Sharma, your father is already on board. He was getting worried about the delay." The mention of her father, a quiet, retired professor who was joining her for a rare trip abroad, sent a fresh pang of anger through Anya. They weren't just disrespecting her, they were delaying her family. But Brenda and Gregory were still trapped in their disbelief. The captain had to be mistaken. Or maybe he was part of the scam. The cognitive dissonance was too great. "That's impossible," Brenda finally stammered, looking at her computer screen as if it held a sacred truth. "The charter for this week was booked by Beaumont Holdings. I have the paperwork right here." Anya understood immediately. It was a common practice. To offset the astronomical costs of ownership, jet owners often allow a management company to charter their aircraft out when they aren't using it. Gregory Beaumont hadn't chartered a generic jet from a fleet. He had chartered her specific plane. "Let me see that," Anya said, her voice now sharp with command. She reached across the counter and took the printout from Brenda's unresisting fingers. Her eyes scanned the document. "You are correct," Anya said, looking at Gregory. "Your company Beaumont Holdings chartered this jet for a round trip to London. The charter agreement is for 5 days, starting tomorrow." She let that sink in. "Today," she continued, her voice dropping to a low, precise tone, "is Friday, August 1st. The charter begins tomorrow, on Saturday, August 2nd. Today, the aircraft is still under my exclusive command. You are a day early for your charter, Mr. Beaumont. You have no more right to be on this aircraft today than she does." She gestured dismissively at Brenda. The foundation of their certainty crumbled. It wasn't just about her clothes anymore. It was about contracts, dates, and logistics, a world they should have understood, but in their arrogance had overlooked. Gregory's face went from smug to confused to flushed with anger. "This is preposterous. My secretary arranged this. There must be a mistake." "There is," Anya said coolly. "Several, in fact. But the most pressing one is that you are preventing me from taking off. Captain," she said, turning to Frank Miller, "please inform the tower that we will be ready for pushback in 5 minutes." "Yes, ma'am," the pilot said, giving a sharp nod before turning to leave. "You can't do this." Gregory sputtered, his voice rising in panic. "I have a board meeting. It's critical." "So do I," Anya said. She looked at Brenda, whose face was now ashen. "And you are the one causing the delay. Now are you going to open this gate? Or do I need to have Captain Miller call the FBO manager and explain why one of his gate agents is refusing to allow the owner of an aircraft onto the tarmac?" Brenda stared at her, speechless. All her petty authority had evaporated, leaving behind only the terrifying prospect of professional ruin. But still, the image of the girl in the hoodie, it just didn't compute. The doubt lingered. Anya saw it in her eyes, the last kernel of disbelief. She sighed. It was time to end this. Not with documents or pilots, but with a piece of evidence so large, so undeniable, it would be seared into their memories forever. "You still don't believe me, do you?" Anya said, her voice quiet. "You still see a fraud. Come here." She gestured for them to follow her, turning, not towards the gate, but towards the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the tarmac. Her stride was confident, purposeful. Hesitantly, like men walking to the gallows, Gregory Beaumont and a trembling Brenda followed her. Matilda trailed behind her face, a mask of confusion. "Look out there," Anya commanded. The tarmac at Teterboro was a playground for the gods of industry and finance. A line of sleek, predatory aircraft sat gleaming under the midday sun, a Bombardier Global 7500, a Dassault Falcon 8X, and several smaller Cessna Citations. They were symbols of untouchable wealth machines that bent time and distance to the will of their owners. But one aircraft stood apart. It was parked directly in front of their viewing window, a position of prominence. It was a Gulfstream GF700, the apex predator of the private aviation world. Its lines were impossibly clean, its pearlescent white paint shimmering. 2 dark blue stripes ran the length of the fuselage, culminating in an elegant sweep up the massive tail. It was larger, newer, and more imposing than anything else on the tarmac. It didn't just suggest wealth, it radiated power. Anya pointed a single steady finger towards the jet. "That one," she said, her voice calm and clear in the now silent lounge. Gregory Beaumont stared at it. He knew the G700. It was the gold standard, the very jet his travel department had confirmed for his trip. A wave of relief washed over him. His trip was secure after all. This whole embarrassing episode with the girl was just a misunderstanding. "Yes, that's it," he said, with renewed confidence. "A beautiful machine. Now, if you'll excuse us, we'd like to board." "You're not listening," Anya said, not taking her eyes off the plane. "You're looking, but you're not seeing. Look closer. Look at the tail." Brenda and Gregory squinted, peering through the polarized glass. The tail of the aircraft was dominated by the vertical stabilizer, emblazoned with the 2 blue stripes, and just below them, in crisp block letters and numbers, mandated by the FAA, was the tail number. It read N7AS. Brenda stared at it blankly. It was just a registration number. It meant nothing to her. But Gregory Beaumont froze. His mind, so quick to calculate risk and status, was now working furiously. N7AS. The letters seemed to jump out at him. OS. His gaze snapped from the tail of the $75 million jet back to the woman standing beside him. He looked at her calm, impassive face, and then back at the tail. A.S. Anya. Sharma. A profound, ice-cold dread began to pool in the pit of his stomach. It couldn't be. It was a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. "That's just the registration number," he said, his voice lacking its earlier conviction. "It doesn't mean anything." "Doesn't it?" Anya replied softly. "Most owners choose a custom registration, something personal, a birthday, an anniversary, or in some cases their initials." She paused, letting the silence stretch, letting the implication land with the force of a physical blow. The color drained from Gregory Beaumont's face. The derisive smirk, the look of entitled confidence, it all melted away, replaced by a mask of slack-jawed horror. His eyes darted between the letters on the tail, and Anya's face, the connection finally irrevocably locking into place in his brain. Brenda, still not understanding, looked at Gregory's shocked expression. "What is it, Mr. Beaumont? What do the letters mean?" But Gregory couldn't speak. His throat was dry. "He's figured it out," Anya said, her voice still quiet, but now resonating with the full weight of her victory. "But just so there's no confusion for anyone else." She pointed again, this time to the fuselage just below the cockpit window. There, painted in elegant 6-foot-tall navy blue script, was the aircraft's given name. It was a single word, a word that defined Anya's entire life's work. It read, Catalyst. And just in case you're still struggling, Brenda, Anya said, turning to face the gate agent directly. Her eyes were like chips of ice. "My full name is Anya Sharma. The registration number on my jet is N7AS. The AS stands for my name. The jet's name is The Catalyst, because it is the product of my company, which I founded and which I own. The company whose board meeting you, Mr. Beaumont, are flying to London to attend." The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just the owner of the jet. This was the Anya Sharma. the mysterious, reclusive founder of Nexus, the architect of the quantum project that Viridian's board was in an uproar about, the woman whose proposal he had been preparing to vocally oppose as too risky and headed by an unproven entity. He had just called the unproven entity a delusional fraud and tried to have her thrown out of the airport. He had done it publicly, loudly, in front of witnesses. A small, choked sound escaped Brenda's lips. The full cataclysmic scale of her error crashed down upon her. She had not just insulted a passenger. She had humiliated the owner of a G700. She had tried to call security on a tech CEO, whose net worth was likely greater than the annual budget of the entire airport. She had sided with a man who, it was now terrifyingly clear, was in a far worse position than she was. The world had been turned upside down. The girl in the hoodie wasn't an imposter trying to get into their world. It turned out they were just ignorant, belligerent squatters in hers. The power dynamic in the room had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. Anya Sharma held all the cards, and they had just shown her with stunning arrogance that they didn't even know they were in a game. Gregory Beaumont opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He just stared at the name on the tail of the jet, a monument to his own spectacular career-ending stupidity. The silence that followed the revelation was heavier than the G700 that sat on the tarmac. It was a silence filled with the deafening sound of careers crashing and burning. The other passengers in the lounge who had been watching with detached amusement now stared with a mixture of awe and pity. They had witnessed a public execution, not of a person, but of status and authority. Brenda was the first to break, her professional composure shattered into a million pieces. "Ms. Sharma, I am so sorry," she stammered, her voice trembling. "I had no idea. I was just following procedure, the system, your appearance." She trailed off, realizing that every excuse she could offer only made it worse. She had judged, and she had judged catastrophically wrong. Anya looked at her, her expression unreadable. There was no triumph in her eyes, no gloating smirk. There was only a profound, chilling coldness. Your procedure is to assume that a woman of color in a sweatshirt cannot possibly be the owner of that aircraft. Your procedure is to take the word of an arrogant man over the documents presented to you. Your procedure is to humiliate a passenger based on their clothing. She let each question hang in the air like a conviction. Your procedures are flawed, and so is your judgment. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. The quiet, factual condemnation was more devastating than any shout could have been. Anya then turned her gaze to Gregory Beaumont. He looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 seconds. His face was pale, his hands were shaking slightly. The mask of aristocratic superiority was gone, replaced by the raw, naked fear of a man who sees the guillotine blade being raised. Ms. Sharma," he began, his voice raspy. "A terrible misunderstanding, a foolish, regrettable mistake on my part. I am deeply embarrassed. Please allow me to apologize." "Apologize for what exactly, Mr. Beaumont?" Anya asked, her tone dangerously neutral. "For assuming I was a delusional fraud, for trying to have me forcibly removed, or for the fact that you were about to fly across the Atlantic on my plane to attend my meeting in order to vote against my life's work without even knowing what I looked like." Gregory flinched as if she had struck him. He had no answer. Every word she spoke was the undeniable truth. "There is nothing you can say that I want to hear, Mr. Beaumont," Anya stated. She turned back to the now petrified Brenda. "Open the gate." Like an automaton, Brenda fumbled with the button and the magnetic lock on the door clicked open. The path to the tarmac was clear. "Captain Miller is waiting," Anya said, shouldering her simple canvas backpack. She started to walk through the gate, then paused and looked back at Gregory. By the way, your charter agreement for tomorrow has been cancelled. My management company will be in touch regarding the refund of your deposit, minus a cancellation fee for the inconvenience. I suggest you check commercial flights. I hear there might be a middle seat left on the red-eye to Heathrow. You should hurry. She delivered the line without a trace of malice, stating it as a simple fact. It was this cold, businesslike dismantling of his world that was so terrifying. It wasn't personal for her. It was just a transaction. He was an inconvenience that was being efficiently removed. With that, she walked through the door and out into the bright sunshine of the tarmac, her sneakers silent on the hot asphalt. She didn't look back. Left behind in the terminal, Gregory Beaumont stood frozen, the blood roaring in his ears. His critical board meeting, his flight, everything was gone. Matilda was tugging on his sleeve, whispering his name in a panic, but he couldn't hear her. He watched through the window as Anya Sharma approached the magnificent jet. The air stairs were already down. A distinguished-looking older man with kind eyes and greying hair, her father appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling and waving at her. She smiled back, a genuine warm smile that they hadn't seen inside. It was a glimpse of the person behind the fortress, a person they had never bothered to look for. Just as Anya reached the bottom of the stairs, a man in a sharp suit, the FBO manager, came running out of an office, his face a mask of pure panic. He had clearly been summoned by a terrified Captain Miller. He intercepted Brenda, who began speaking frantically, gesturing between the window and the jet. The manager's face went from confused to horrified. He barked an order at Brenda, who looked like she was about to faint, and then he sprinted out onto the tarmac towards Anya's plane. He reached her, just as she put her foot on the first step. He spoke to her, his posture radiating deference and apology. Anya listened for a moment, gave a short, sharp nod, and then continued up the stairs without a backward glance. The manager was left standing on the tarmac, staring up at the closed door of the G700. Inside the terminal, Gregory watched it all. He saw Anya disappear into the aircraft. He saw the air stairs retract. He saw the ground crew remove the chocks. He heard the low whine of the Rolls-Royce engines beginning to spool up a sound that was supposed to be his ticket to London, but was now the sound of his own ruin. The manager walked back inside his face, grim. He went directly to Brenda. "My office. Now." He commanded, his voice low and furious. Brenda, her face streaked with tears, followed him like a condemned prisoner. Gregory Beaumont was alone, his wife looking at him with frightened eyes. He had been so sure of his power, of his place in the world, and in the space of 10 minutes, a quiet woman in a grey hoodie had taken it all apart, piece by piece, not with anger, but with the cold, hard logic of a world he no longer understood. As the G700, the catalyst, began its powerful, elegant taxi toward the runway, he finally understood. He hadn't just been rude. He had committed an act of self-sabotage, so complete, so total, that it was almost a work of art. The flight to London was smooth. Above the clouds with the world, a serene blanket of white, below Anya finally allowed herself to breathe. Her father, a gentle retired literature professor named Ben Sharma, watched her with concern. He had seen the commotion from the aircraft window and knew his daughter well enough to understand the steel behind her quiet demeanor. "Everything all right, my dear?" he asked softly. Anya managed a small smile. "Everything's under control, Dad." She opened her laptop. The link to the quantum processor was stable. The demonstration was secure. She had won the battle at the gate. Now she had to win the war in the boardroom. Meanwhile, 35,000 feet below, Gregory Beaumont's world was imploding in real time. The red-eye to Heathrow was, as Anya had predicted, a nightmare. He, a man accustomed to lie-flat beds and champagne service, found himself crammed into a middle seat in premium economy, the best his frantic secretary could find. Matilda was miserable beside him, the silence between them thick with blame. He spent 7 agonizing hours with his knees pressed against the seat in front of him, his mind replaying the scene at the FBO in a torturous loop. The girl in the hoodie, the name on the tail, the cold finality in her voice. He arrived in London, disheveled, sleep-deprived, and filled with a gnawing dread. He went straight to his hotel, showered, and put on his most formidable suit, a piece of armor that suddenly felt like a costume. He headed to the Viridian Dynamics Tower for the 11:00 a.m. emergency board meeting. As he walked into the opulent 50th floor boardroom, the atmosphere was already tense. Alistair Finch, the Viridian CEO, stood at the head of the table, his face grim. The other board members were murmuring their expressions, a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Gregory took his seat, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Alistair began. "As you know, we are here to make a final decision on the acquisition of Project Catalyst. The potential of this technology is, as I've stated before, revolutionary. However, I know some of you, Gregory included, have reservations about the stability of the technology and the leadership behind it." Gregory felt a hot flush of shame. His own words were being read back to him. The founder of Nexus Logistics and the creator of Project Catalyst, Ms. Anya Sharma, has flown in to present a live demonstration and answer our questions, Alistair continued. Her presentation is the sole agenda item today. After that, we vote. Gregory's heart hammered against his ribs. She's here, in this building. He prayed she wouldn't mention their encounter. Maybe she would be professional. Maybe she would rise above it. The doors to the boardroom opened. Alistair Finch smiled. "Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Ms. Anya Sharma." Anya walked in. She was no longer the girl in the grey hoodie. She was dressed in a razor-sharp, dark blue pantsuit, her hair styled impeccably, her face confident and composed. She radiated an aura of intellect and power that instantly commanded the room's attention. She walked to the front of the room, her eyes sweeping over the board members. Her gaze met Gregory's. For a fraction of a second, there was a flicker of recognition. But there was no anger, no malice. There was nothing. It was the look one might give a piece of furniture. She had already dismissed him from her mind. That utter lack of acknowledgement was more terrifying than any confrontation. For the next hour, Anya held the board captive. She explained quantum computing in terms a layman could understand, her passion for the subject evident and infectious. Then, on the massive screen behind her, she initiated the live demonstration. She fed the system a logistical problem that would take a traditional supercomputer weeks to solve, rerouting every single cargo ship in the North Atlantic in real time to avoid a simulated fast-moving hurricane while optimizing fuel consumption and port arrival times. The catalyst solved it in 90 seconds. The boardroom was silent, then erupted in gasps and applause. It wasn't just a technological leap, it was a paradigm shift. It was magic. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. Even Gregory, his face pale and his hands sweating, raised a shaky hand in favor. To vote against her now would be to vote against reality itself. After the vote, as champagne was being served, Alistair Finch approached Gregory. "Gregory, a word." He led him to a corner of the room. "There's a delicate matter I need to discuss with you. It's about Beaumont Holdings." Gregory's blood ran cold. "Your Q2 earnings report was alarming," Alistair said, his voice low. "Your manufacturing division is getting killed by overseas competition, and your real estate portfolio is over-leveraged. Your stock has been in a nosedive for 6 months. The banks are calling in their loans. To be blunt, you're on the verge of insolvency. Gregory knew all this. He had been hoping a successful partnership with Viridian would give him the leverage to renegotiate his debt. However, Alistair continued, your logistics network is still a viable asset, inefficient but viable. As part of her acquisition deal, Ms. Sharma has identified Beaumont Holdings as a key strategic target. Gregory stared at him, uncomprehending. A target? She wants to buy you out, Alistair said plainly. Integrate your shipping and warehousing infrastructure into her Nexus system. She believes her software can make your network profitable within a year. The floor seemed to drop out from under Gregory's feet. Anya Sharma didn't just want to deal with Viridian. She wanted to buy his company, his family's legacy, everything he had built. Her offer is not generous, Alistair warned. She's offering to assume your debt and buy out your public stock at 20 cents on the dollar. It's a lowball offer, but frankly, it's the only one on the table. The alternative is bankruptcy court, where your creditors will pick the bones clean, and you'll be left with nothing. The karma was no longer just a cascade. It was a tidal wave. The woman he had dismissed as a fraud was now the only person who could save him from total financial ruin. And she was offering to do it by taking everything from him, not out of spite, but as a cold, calculated business decision. She saw value in his assets, but not in him. He was trapped. His arrogance at a private airport in New Jersey had not just cost him his dignity. It had delivered his entire empire bound and gagged into the hands of the very person he had scorned. He was about to lose it all, not to a rival, but to a consequence. A consequence wearing a dark blue pantsuit, currently accepting the congratulations of the most powerful people in the room. The aftermath of the London board meeting was not a slow decline for Gregory Beaumont. It was a free fall without a parachute. The moment the unanimous vote confirmed Anya Sharma's acquisition, his phone, which once buzzed incessantly with calls from brokers and partners, fell silent. The power he had projected was revealed to be a reflection of his position, not an inherent quality, and his position was now gone. He flew back to New York in commercial coach, a fresh and bitter humiliation to a storm of his own making. His first meeting was with the legal team for Beaumont Holdings. He walked in expecting to strategize, to fight, to find a loophole. Instead, he found 3 lawyers with grim faces and a mountain of files detailing the company's financial fragility. There is no counteroffer to make Gregory, the lead counsel, a man he'd golfed with for years, told him bluntly. Nexus Logistics is offering to assume all our outstanding debt, all of it. The Taggart loan, the bonds due in 6 months, everything. If we refuse, the banks will call in those loans and we'll be forced into Chapter 7 liquidation within a week. We won't be selling assets, we'll be conducting a fire sale. Another lawyer chimed in. Their team is formidable. They sent over a preliminary restructuring plan this morning. They've already identified redundancies, inefficiencies in our shipping routes, and outdated warehouse management systems. It's like they've had a microscope on our books for months. Gregory sank into his leather chair, the irony suffocating him. Anya Sharma's company specialized in logistics. Of course, they knew his company's weaknesses. They had likely modeled his company's collapse as a simple data problem on a Tuesday afternoon. He wasn't a rival to be fought. He was an inefficiency to be corrected. The acquisition was a masterclass in impersonal dismantling. Anya herself never spoke to him again. He dealt only with her ferocious team of lawyers and analysts, young, sharp minds, who spoke a language of data and efficiency he couldn't grasp. They didn't gloat or posture, they simply executed. They dismantled his board, bought out his executive team, and presented him with the final, unnegotiable terms. The signing took place a month later in a soulless glass conference room downtown. Anya was present, seated at the far end of the table, flanked by her CFO and legal counsel. She wore a simple black dress, her focus entirely on the documents in front of her. Gregory watched his hand, the hand that once signed multi-million-dollar deals with a flourish, tremble as he signed away his family's legacy. As the meeting concluded and people began to pack their briefcases, he felt an overwhelming need to understand. He walked the length of the table until he stood before her. Was it because of what happened at the airport? He asked, his voice raw. He needed it to be personal, to be an act of passion. It would be a more dignified end than being erased by an algorithm. Anya looked up, her gaze, not hostile, but analytical, as if he were a specimen. Mr. Beaumont, the incident at Teterboro was informative. She said, her voice measured and precise. It provided a crucial piece of qualitative data. It revealed a leadership culture rooted in assumption and prejudice, which is a reliable indicator of systemic inefficiency. A man who cannot see the value in a person standing right in front of him will undoubtedly overlook value in the market. She leaned forward slightly. Your company was failing because you were running it with the same blind spots you displayed at that gate. You were looking at the world, but you weren't seeing the patterns. You weren't seeing the future. She then looked back down at her tablet, swiping to the next item on her agenda. This wasn't revenge. This was an acquisition of underperforming, but fundamentally sound assets. Your personal behavior merely confirmed my team's valuation and removed any hesitation I might have had. You were a risk factor that has now been mitigated. The cold clinical finality of her words was worse than any insult. He had not been vanquished by a vengeful rival. He had been optimized out of existence. He turned and walked out of the room, not just a former CEO, but a historical footnote in his own story. The karma for Brenda was less corporate, but no less absolute. Fired that same day, she discovered her name was poison in the tight-knit world of private aviation. The story of her monumental blunder had spread like wildfire. No FBO in the tri-state area would touch her. After months of unemployment and mounting bills, she took the only job she could get, working the late shift at the information desk for the Port Authority bus terminal. Her new reality was a cacophony of diesel fumes, echoing announcements, and the desperate energy of the transient. One evening, while directing a lost tourist to a gate, she glanced at a discarded magazine on a nearby seat. On the cover was a face she saw every night in her nightmares, Anya Sharma. The headline read, "The Quiet Revolutionary, How Anya Sharma's Aegis Initiative is Using Quantum AI to Predict Global Disasters." The article detailed the successful evacuation of a town in the path of a typhoon, saving thousands. Brenda stared at the photo, Anya standing on a stage, calm and powerful, and the grimy reality of her bus station surroundings seemed to close in on her. She had stood feet away from a person changing the world and had seen nothing but a hoodie. 1 year later, the world had moved on. The name Beaumont Holdings was officially retired, its trucks and warehouses now bearing the sleek Nexus logo. Under Anya's command, powered by her software, the old network ran with terrifying efficiency, its profitability soaring. Gregory Beaumont now lived in a modest condo in Florida, his G700 dreams replaced by the reality of a used sedan. His old contacts no longer returned his calls. He would sometimes see a Nexus truck drive by and feel a phantom limb ache for the empire he had lost. His true punishment wasn't poverty. It was watching the world thrive in the hands of the person he had deemed unworthy of it. Anya, for her part, rarely thought of him. She was too busy running her expanding company and refining the Aegis Initiative. She still wore the grey hoodie, not out of humility, but as a tool. In new meetings with potential partners, she would often wear it on the first day. It had become her litmus test. It allowed her to see who had the vision to look past the surface and who was blinded by their own assumptions. It was a filter. She had learned from that day at Teterboro that a person's worth is not in the clothes they wear or the titles they hold. It's in the problems they can solve and the future they can build. The ledger of karma she had come to understand wasn't balanced by anger or revenge. It was balanced by competence, by progress, and by the relentless, unyielding forward march of a future that has no time for the arrogant fools left behind. In the end, this wasn't just a story about a woman proving her doubters wrong. It was a real-world lesson in the high cost of prejudice. Gregory Beaumont and Brenda didn't just have a bad day. They made a bad decision. They chose to see a threat in someone who was different, to trust their own biases instead of the facts in front of them. And in doing so, they collided with a force they couldn't comprehend. Karma in this story wasn't some mystical force. It was the logical, unavoidable consequence of their own actions delivered by the very person they tried to diminish. Anya Sharma's victory wasn't just in boarding her jet. It was in her choice to respond not with petty revenge, but with overwhelming, undeniable competence. She didn't just win the argument, she bought the whole company. What do you think was the karma they received fair? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story of justice and vindication as compelling as we did, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories where the underestimated rise up to change the world. Thanks for watching.